Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 mini-series with the Los Angeles Angels. And our run with the Angels has come to an end, just completed the 2030 season, our sixth season in Los Angeles with the Angels. And all worked out very well this final year. Ended up winning a World Series for the second consecutive season. So certainly ended up being a pretty successful playthrough. We'll talk when we do our season and series recap here about some of the things that worked out well for us as we went through this series. But ultimately, when you look at the summary statistics of our top players from this championship season, what really worked out is pretty easy to figure out. When we look at shortstop Sean Gamble, center fielder Andres Rodriguez, and pitcher Jake Riley, those were the three highest WAR players on this team, and they were our first round draft picks in three consecutive seasons that we happened to hit on all of them. Sean Gamble was the second overall pick in 2025, our first draft with the team. Andres Rodriguez was the sixth overall pick in 2026, and Jake Riley was 14th overall in 2027 when we were picking early in the draft in the early stages of this playthrough, when we benefited from the bad season that the previous Angels regime had in 2024, and the bad seasons we had our first 2 years here with the Angels. And ultimately, after those first couple rough seasons, ended up being successful, as we talked about. 64 and 98 that first year, so we only improved one game from the bad 2024 team. Close to 500, but still 14 games behind in 2026. And after we had moved on from the bad contracts that were on the books, took advantage of the fact that we were able to make some good trades, and more importantly, once we got those bad contracts off the books, this was a team that typically had a budget in the top 10, top 12, and we spread that money around pretty actively in free agency over the years, and certainly had the opportunity to bring on some salaries and contracts to help propel us to better finishes when we closed in on the trade deadline each year. So after we got those bad contracts off the books, it wasn't the most challenging playthrough in the world. Ended up winning 94, 102, 107, and 104 games in our final four seasons. Won the AL West and made the playoffs each year. And as we talked about, we did win the World Championship each of the last two seasons. We've got our end-of-year review. Some positive things. Fan loyalty increased to very good, driven by another strong season. We had a very successful year, so it's a bit disappointing to see that our budget actually, I think, dropped another $2 million to $296 million. We had the budget cut back a year ago after we won the World Series, but we lost a lot of money that year. This past season, however, we made over $52 million for Mr. Moreno, and he still cut our budget by $2 million. I guess we proved that we could be successful with a smaller budget, and even though he's allegedly charitable in terms of his fiscal personality, he's cut us back two consecutive seasons in our budget despite winning the World Series both years. Last thing on a higher level that we'll check in on is his review of our season goals. Happy we won the championship. Disappointed we didn't sign Logan Gilbert. Okay with Jock Peterson as a power hitter. Did better in extra inning games. Still unhappy with what we've done with our international amateur fines. As I've talked about many times, getting this goal when you are in the first year of a playthrough is just kind of silly, because it takes the better part of a decade for these 16-year-old prospects that you're signing each year in international amateur free agency to really make an impact. Happy that we won another title, good with our overall performance on goals, and very happy with the on and off field success of the team. Only wants us to play 500 ball next year, but does want us to sign Sean Gamble, continue our current record of success in the next 3 seasons. So we're moving on, so not the most important thing in the world. We did get a virtual contract extension, only 2 years and $1.9 million a year. We've won back-to-back World Series titles at this point, and we've ultimately had a pretty good history. I guess we did get a nice bump to $1.9 million a year from $800,000, but would have thought that back-to-back World Series titles would merit more than just a tepid 2-year contract extension. Take a final look at our statistics for the season. The 104-58 record was much better than the 96 wins that we were projected for. Had a winning record every month except for June, when we were a game below 500, but we bounced back from there with an outstanding July. We're good in August and September, and even though we were pushed to 7 games in the World Series, we ultimately got the job done, coming back from a 3-1 deficit against the Diamondbacks, second in the American League in runs scored, and you can see we were in the top 6 in all offensive categories, including stolen bases, 14th in base running. However, solid defensive team, 4th in defensive efficiency, 6th in zone rating, and the pitching staff was excellent, 2nd in the league in runs allowed, generally in the top 5 in the league in most categories, except for starters ERA, where we ended up middle of the pack in 8th, and home runs allowed, where we were 10th this past year. But still, overall, a very good season. Pitching-wise, Spencer Schwellenbach has been our ace since we picked him up when we traded away Adley Rutschman, 17-10, led the league in whip, walks per 9, and strikeouts per 9 this year. Jake Riley, we already touched upon him. Outstanding first full season in the majors, 11-7, almost 200 strikeouts, and a 4.3 WAR. He was one of our big experiments in this playthrough. We picked him 14th overall, despite having a lot of concerns about the personality, particularly and most importantly that low work ethic. Also did not appreciate the low leadership. The low financial ambition and loyalty, or the high financial ambition and low loyalty more accurately, were concerns for us, but not the type of personality that I would typically gravitate towards. But we decided to give it a try, and have to say that a high ceiling player with a negative personality, if we've got good coaching in the organization and we know we're going to be able to invest in player development, and we're going to be willing to put that player through the development lab on a regular basis, probably should be a little more willing than I have been over the years to experiment with players with those kind of negative personalities. So that was a useful takeaway. Taj Bradley, 11-7 with a 4.81 ERA and a 3.4 WAR on the season. And then Michael King, who we brought back on a team option for $17 million this year, 11-9 with a 4.76 ERA, only a 1.1 WAR. Definitely did not contribute as much as we would have hoped, but we are still world champions, so we can't complain too much. Cade Smith took over as our closer this year, had 40 saves. The ERA was close to 4, and he was actually slightly below replacement level. Walked 25 batters and allowed 9 home runs in 59 1/3 innings. Did for a while. He was saving pretty much every game we played in the playoffs. All said and done, he had 6 saves in 7 appearances this postseason with a 1.50 ERA and he's actually been better in each of the past two postseasons when we've won the World Series than he was in the regular season. Below replacement level in the regular season, but above replacement level in the postseason in both years. Lefty Garrett McDaniels, a very successful lefty reliever for us over the years, 2.23 ERA and a 1.5 WAR this season. Carlos Espinoza, who we picked up in a trade with the Yankees a couple of seasons ago, led the league in holds for a second straight year, 2.60 ERA, is a key contributor to our bullpen. And then Tyler Koopman had a monster year for us, a fifth-round pick who's become an outstanding left-handed reliever, 7-3 record, saved 5 games for us at times when we needed a reliever when Smith was banged up. 162 strikeouts in just 95 2/3 innings. Did give up 11 homers, did walk 37 batters, but ultimately had a 2.82 ERA, ridiculous more than 15 strikeouts per 9 innings, and a WAR of almost 3 as a setup man for us primarily. Righty Justin Buchanan, 2.45 ERA, working out of the bullpen for us. Solid year for the 6th-round draft pick from 2027. So between the likes of Buchanan, Tyler Koopman, and Jake Riley, that 2027 draft was very fruitful for us as far as pitchers. Brought on Dustin May before the trade deadline as a potential insurance policy for us. Not a great pitcher at this point in his career, but still was a guy that we were happy to have on board as an insurance policy. And May ultimately with us, 1-0 record in 15 games, 2.63 ERA over 27 1/3 innings. Wrecked physically, was a pure rental, but he got the first ring in his career with us. George Klassen was our 5th starter for most of the year after we lost Mr. Scott to injuries and ultimately traded him away. All he did was go 14-4 with a sub-3 ERA and throw a no-hitter for us in his first start after we put him into the rotation, ultimately at 2.7 WAR. He is one of the few players who is a holdover from the roster that we took over and a guy who came up through the Angels organization. Lefty pitcher Pat Baser, a guy who we picked up past offseason, 5-0 record with a 3.80 ERA, primarily as a lefty specialist for us. He was actually below replacement level, so really didn't work out as well as we had hoped. A few other guys. Colin Snyder was up with us all year, 4.45 ERA over 58 2/3 innings, although he was the odd man out when we moved to a 12-man pitching staff for the postseason. Lefty Joey Broughton was up and down over the course of the year, an ERA of just over 4 in Los Angeles. And then Andy Kraft, who was a second-round pick in 2026, made his major league debut in September when we moved to a 6-man rotation to try to ensure that we were healthy come playoff time. Did have a 1-0 record, but a very sickly 8.69 ERA with 26 hits and 13 walks allowed in just 19 2/3 innings. So his whip was close to 2, but certainly has a skill set and potential that at 22 years old indicate he is likely to be a pretty solid pitcher in the future. Turn now to our very strong lineup, and our everyday players had a very productive platoon at catcher for a second straight year. Juan Flores, an excellent defensive catcher, had a second straight above-average offensive season, hitting .257 with 5 homers and 24 ribbies and 191 at-bats. Put up a WAR of close to 2, playing primarily against left-handed starters. And then Min Jae Kim, who we signed from South Korea as an international free agent a couple of years ago. .240 average, 19 homers, 55 ribbies, Ultimately put up a 113 WRC plus and a 2.9 WAR as our primary catcher against right-handed pitching. Vlad Guerrero Jr., one of the guys we were able to add to this team in that first off season after we cleared some salary off the books and took advantage of being a big market team. Had a solid season for us this year. After he got off to a really good start with the batting average, he ended up dipping all the way to just 248, but did have 29 homers and 111 ribbies, led the American League with 622 at-bats. Ultimately, 111 WRC plus and a 1.9 WAR. He also was the World Series most valuable player. Can't say when all is said and done over his 5 years in Los Angeles that 134 home runs and 507 ribbies. So if we average those numbers out, and I can do a little bit of quick math here, 27 home runs, 101 ribbies a year with a 261 average. Probably not exactly what we were looking for at about $37 million a year, but 2 world championships in 5 seasons certainly is still a satisfying result. Zach Neto, the only full-time everyday player who's been with us since the beginning of this, actually moved into more of a utility role this year, but still a guy who's been on the roster for us for all 6 seasons. 242 average, 8 homers and 29 ribbies, did steal 13 bases, was half a win above replacement level. We knew that at $15 million for this year, with the way we were likely to use him, and with the fact that his batting ratings have deteriorated a bit from what we thought his peak was, that he wasn't going to necessarily be the best value this year, but we were able to afford him, and certainly a more than competent utility infielder. Yoshihiko Wakabayashi, international free agent, similar to the catcher Kim that we signed 2 years ago. Wakabayashi to a monster contract, 10 years, over $400 million. And I had an off year for him compared to his first season with us. But when all was said and done, played much better in the second half of the year than the first half. Finished with a 280 batting average, 6 homers, 56 ribbies, on-base percentage of 380, OPS of 770, 116 WRC plus, and a 2 WAR. That WAR would have certainly been higher, but we decided, given that his range had dropped to 60, to move him off short and to second during the regular season. We taught him how to play that position at the major league level over the second half of the year. He went from a 20 to ultimately a 60 by the end of the playoffs in terms of his proficiency at the position. But it was a very ugly path to get there, with a minus 5.6 zone rating and a .863 defensive efficiency. So it was certainly not a decision that helped us win now over the course of the regular season, to pivot him to second base, as he was pretty brutal in those 44 games learning the position at the major league level, despite the fact that he was a slightly above average defensive shortstop, which is a more demanding defensive position. But when all was said and done, we did get a second consecutive world championship for Mr. Wakabayashi. So both him and Kim are 2 for 2 in winning the World Series since they came over. Joshua Lugo, starting third baseman for us against, actually a starting first baseman for us against left-handed pitching, as we moved Guerrero into the DH role against lefties. Lugo hit 270 with 15 homers and 36 ribbies and 293 at-bats. Very solid utility guy for us, who put up a 120 WRC plus in his first full year in the majors. Anthony Volpe, third baseman, led the American League with 44 doubles. Ultimately, the 236 batting average was not particularly impressive, but he was basically a league average player with a captain personality, great influence in the clubhouse. 28 out of 28 stealing bases this year and put up a 3.7 WAR for us. So very useful as a third baseman for us against right-handed pitching, and we pivot him to shortstop against left-handed pitching. And the guy who took over as our shortstop against right-handed pitching when we moved Mr. Wakabayashi to second base was Sean Gamble, the range of 70, even though his arm is not quite as good as Wakabayashi's, is why we wanted him at short more often. Gamble, really nice sophomore season, 294 average, went from 7 homers and 44 ribbies to 32 homers and 86 ribbies, so really developed the power in the year that he turned 24 years old. Also stole 15 bases, ultimately a 138 WRC plus and a team best 6.4 WAR. Another captain personality with a lot of positive personality traits. So he is a guy who worked out really well for us thus far as a second overall pick a couple of years ago. The last infielder to mention, Oswaldo Patino, a guy who's come up through the organization, hit .338 in his first 71 at-bats, but was not on the playoff roster. And last but not least, we'll turn to our outfielders. Carlos Jorge, a guy we traded with the White Sox a year and a half ago to bring on board, and unfortunately, he hasn't been the offensive player that we had hoped. 12 homers, 51 ribbies this year, but was still a below average offensive player with a 99 OPS plus and a 96 WRC plus for us. Set to make almost $10 million next year in arbitration, so that will be an interesting decision for the new regime. Jock Peterson took over as our DH against right-handed pitching after we traded for him right before the trade deadline, and he was extremely effective for us. 11 homers and 23 ribbies in just 121 at-bats. Put up a 167 WRC plus and helped lengthen that strong lineup of ours. He also won the Division Series MVP on his way to the first title of his major league career. Anthony Scull followed up a very good rookie year with a solid sophomore season, 263 average, 15 homers, 13 steals, 113 WRC plus as our primary left fielder against right-handed pitching. Andy Pages, a guy we picked up this past off season to be a relatively expensive platoon guy for us, starting primarily against left-handed pitching. Put up a 104 WRC plus, so he was only slightly above average, slightly above replacement level in terms of his WAR. 237 average with 7 homers and 33 ribbies in 274 at-bats. Is not really what we were looking for a guy who certainly looked like he could be pretty strong against left-handed pitching. When we look at his splits, he was slightly above average against lefties and pretty much spot on average in terms of his WRC plus against righties this season. Kyle Tucker, who along with Michael King and Vlad Guerrero Jr. were those 3 key free agent signings of our first offseason, had some injury issues this year. The batting average dipped to 227, only 15 homers and 51 ribbies, 1.6 WAR. We exercised a team option to bring him back this past year, but he would be headed to free agency now. I think at almost 34 years old, likely would be moving on from him. And then last, but certainly not least, Andres Rodriguez had an off year for him. The batting average fell to 242. That said, still had 36 home runs and 92 ribbies, still stole 22 bases, walked 93 times as he really improved his eye in the development lab last offseason. So ultimately had a 128 WRC plus and a 4.3 WAR. Another guy with a really good personality that has worked out very well for us from the draft. I think in our new playthrough, in our long playthrough, it's very conceivable that we're not going to draft a player as good as Andres Rodriguez. So hopefully we'll have some good storylines. Hopefully there will be some great homegrown talent that we draft, sign, and develop in our OOTP 26 long-term series. But it's certainly not going to shock me if we don't ever come up with anyone who's as good as Put Rodriguez and the potential he has for a really incredible fictional career here at the age of 26. Look at a few other things quickly before we finish up this series for good. The minor league system with a lot of the good development that we've talked about with those guys at the major league level now ranks just 13th overall out of 30 teams. 5 top 100 prospects. Heriberto Garza, IAFA signing from a couple years ago. Pitched only 3 games this year, 0-1 record with a 3.86 ERA. Shoulder inflammation shut him down in late June. He's fragile physically, listed as the number 15 prospect in baseball, has an incredibly high ceiling, but still a lot of work for the 19-year-old to do. Manny Cruz, 4th round pick from that incredible 2027 pitching draft for us. Promoted to AAA right at the end of this season, was 11-4 with a 3.73 ERA in AA. 3-0 in 4 starts at Salt Lake with a 2.10 ERA. So he certainly looks like a potential really nice addition to the pitching staff going forward, along with Andy Kraft. Paul Clark, the number 56 prospect in baseball, was our 1st round pick just a few months ago. Out of Wilmington University, 1-1 with a 0.90 ERA in A-ball, and then we promoted him to high A, where he went 2-2 with a 4.10 ERA. Looks like a guy who's potentially a couple years away from being able to help us. Another guy with a negative personality, but with what we learned from Mr. Riley, we were willing to roll the dice on a fairly developed college player who had above average upside, in our opinion. Final top 100 prospect is a guy who unfortunately tore his UCL right at the end of this season. Mike Scott had a 0.69 ERA in 13 innings in AA for us, and then a 3.68 ERA in 7.1 innings in Salt Lake. Gonna miss basically all of next year. And a really unfortunate injury history. You can see September 30th, 2029, partially torn UCL, which cost him a big chunk of this last season. Came back, pitched reasonably well, and then on the 20th of September this year, a torn UCL. So who knows what he's going to look like when all is said and done. Again, though, that 2027 draft was incredible for us from a pitching perspective. Scott was in the 11th round, and another very promising prospect if he can recover from all of these significant injuries. And we'll also take a look at 2 of the key players in this series who didn't spend tons of time with us. Mike Trout, we traded away for Adley Rutschman when this series was in its very early stages, right before the trade deadline in 2025. Trout this year for the Orioles, 210 average, 25 homers, 79 ribbies. Does have a second consecutive year where he played 150 games. That's basically because he is a full-time DH at this point. Put up a 104 WRC plus, only a 0.7 WAR. We did try to trade for him to bring him back right before the trade deadline, thinking we might be able to sneak in a World Series ring for him in what would have been the final year of that big contract that he had signed. Actually, looks like he has now signed an extension with the Orioles, but he exercised those 10-5 rights, as we said. Certainly think it was the right move to move on from him. In the last 5.5 seasons with Baltimore, he's hit 225 with 125 homers, 370 ribbies. slightly above average offensively, 8.8 WAR over those 5.5 seasons. He is a guy who has definitely been cursed by the little flaw in the early versions of this OOTP 26 where players' defensive skills deteriorated dramatically in their mid to late 30s. That has allegedly been addressed in the new version. So hopefully in the world that I inhabit in our long-term play, Trout will have a little more defensive success over the final years of his career, whether they end up with the Angels, the Orioles, or somebody else. Adley Rutschman, as I mentioned, was the main guy we got back from the Orioles when we traded Trout away. Very effective year this season for the Braves with a 132 WRC plus and a 2.3 WAR. The issue is he put up those numbers over just 65 games and 203 at-bats, as he did have some injury issues. But Rutschman, since we traded him away midway through the 2027 season, has had a solid run with Atlanta. 262 average for them with a 115 WRC plus. A little more effective than he was with us, where he hit 255 with a 112 WRC plus over his time with the Angels. As I noted, we traded Trout for Rutschman, and then when we dealt Rutschman away, the primary asset we got back from the Braves was Spencer Schwellenbach, who ended up being a very important pitcher for us in this series. And with that, our series with the Los Angeles Angels in OOTP 26 is a wrap. Thanks for those of you who have followed us over these 54 episodes. Appreciate the thoughts, appreciate the feedback, appreciate the interaction, and always enjoy hearing the recommendations of the Worldwide Scouting Department on what we should do in the draft, what we should do in international amateur free agency, what we should do in free agency, what we should do in the trade market, what we should do with our lineup, what we should do with our coaching. Always interesting to learn from and hear from those of you who are kind enough to take the time to share your thoughts with us. As I said, ultimately it was a pretty successful series, I think, with 4 playoff appearances to finish things off and 2 World Series titles. But as I noted, although the Angels have been a team, given those contracts, most notably of Trout and Rendon, that I've noted as a potential challenging team over the past few years when I do my 10 challenging teams to consider an OOTP episode. Clearly, the fact that the Angels are a big market team with a pretty good sized budget makes it a relatively easy rebuild compared to some of those others, especially if you're as ruthless as me and you let go of Trout rather than trying to win him a World Series. And as I noted, if you're also as lucky as we were here with 3 straight first-round draft picks that didn't just hit, but really hit hard and were incredibly successful. And that definitely was a great thing that happened to us that you certainly can't count on in any given year. So when all was said and done, happy with the way this playthrough went. As I said, thanks for those of you who have followed us, whether it's just for this episode or throughout the entire series. What's next for the channel? The next thing we're going to put out is an episode in which we talk about settings. It'll be a tutorial episode that kind of walks through the settings in a bit more detail than I normally do, and also lets you know that the settings we're going to be using for our long play have gotten some good feedback in recent days, in recent, honestly, months and years from viewers on the settings. Most recently have been going back and forth in some of the comments with Jack Hammer Possessor, who's had some good suggestions for us on how to try to hopefully make things as challenging as possible. You know, admittedly, you know, if you play this game long enough, you're probably going to have a good degree of success in it. So I'm not claiming that anything we're doing here is brain surgery, but want to have fun, tell a good story, and hopefully have some challenging decisions to make over the time. But we'll go through the settings in great detail, and then after that, we will put out a very short episode of the show that lets those of you who are interested know what team we're going to be playing with for our long-term simulation. And then we will get into the new series. So a lot more information will be coming out over the next couple of days. Appreciate all of you who have watched us over the days and months and years since we started this channel. If you haven't subscribed, would appreciate that. As I noted, always good to hear from people in the comment section. And hopefully we'll have some fun on our new adventure in OOTP 26. Definitely had a good time here with the Angels, but it's on to the long play. Until our next episode, which will be that tutorial about settings. Thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.